Hey guys, welcome back to the MLS Updater with me, Mike Rice. Today we're going to be talking all things New England Revolution, and today I've got Sam Minton with me today. Sam, how are you?
Doing good, doing good. Ready for a 2022 season. We got the kit that just launched today, so focus on 2022 after a tough 2021.
Yeah. Oh well, a tough 2022, wasn't it? We're
You
2023
know
now.
what? You know what years? I wish it was 2021. That's why I
Yeah.
was thinking that way.
Excellent. So, can you let everyone know a little bit about your experience following the team and where they can get up to date information on the New England Revolution?
Yeah, so I've been covering the team for about 3 years now, with the Blazing Musket, formerly the Bent Musket of SB Nation. We got dropped by SB Nation with all the layoffs that they had, and we now started a news site. And it's been great to see all the support that we've gotten from our fans, but it's been absolutely amazing getting to cover the Revs for 3 seasons so far. So definitely, make sure to check out our work over at www.theblazingmusket.com, and you can also find us on Twitter at Blazing Musket. So thank you so much for having me on, Michael.
Yeah, it's going to be great to chat to you. It's the first time talking New England Revolution on the MLS update. So it's going to be fun to look through. Like you say, it was a fantastic 2021. The incredible season there. Carlos Hill, just setting the league alight, but things didn't really go to plan in 2022 in any sense of the word. I guess one of the big bits that one of the first things we need to talk about is how difficult the loss of Adam Buxer and Matt Turner were to the side.
Yeah, definitely losing someone of Matt Turner's caliber. He started for the U.S. men's national team over in Qatar. It was a big blow, and there was lots of questions about who would be able to take over.
Mm.
Obviously, there was Earl Edwards was on the roster, same for Brad Knighton. There's a youngster, Jacob Jackson, who's coming up through the ranks. But the Revolution ended up going and getting George Petrovic, and he's been an absolute hit. It's
Yeah.
been absolutely amazing seeing him play. Just his shot stopping ability is it's probably, I would say, the top in MLS, and it was almost a seamless transition in terms of in the net. Having Petrovic come in, and Turner himself even said that I think he's probably going to be better than I am, and he is better than me than when I was his age. So it was great to see that. Up front, the loss of Adam Buksa was massive. He
Mm.
was scoring goals at an epic rate, and it seemed like he was gonna, possibly contend for the Golden Boot. But then when he was transferred out, there was lots of questions. Obviously, in the off season, you had a guy like Josie Altidore come in, but he just never worked out. Gustavo
No.
Bo isn't really that traditional number nine, similar to
Mm.
Buksa. So that's kind of a weird positioning. And then also too, we went out and got Giacomo Veroni. And I think it's really tough coming into MLS in the middle of the season. You saw
Yeah.
it with Musa in his first season, and then you saw it with Giacomo Veroni. Injuries and just, getting into the flow of a new league can be very difficult. So it'll be interesting to see if a guy like Veroni can come in and make an impact, this season. But especially last season, the striker position had a lot of question marks. And, Carlos Hill can do a lot of things. But if you don't got a guy up front, whether it be in the air or just that tactical number nine ability, he kind of gets wasted out there a little bit.
Yeah, that's one thing I've said. Josie obviously didn't work out. Left relatively quickly out on loan. Sebastian Leggett was brought in. Again, didn't have quite the impact you would have hoped. He went off to FC Dallas. Didn't finish the season with New England. So is there concerns over what the club are doing in bringing in players? Is the way they're getting their recruitment done? Is there concerns about that, do you think?
I would say there's definitely some skepticism in terms of when you look at the domestic transfers. A lot of these players can be connected to Bruce Arena.
Mm.
They're players that Bruce has coached before. Especially last season, you saw a guy like Sebastian Lletget, like you mentioned, Josie, Omar Gonzalez, and obviously, I think Sebastian Lletget was probably the cream of the crop in terms of those. But with Josie and Omar, they really did not hit at all.
Yeah.
So now, this off season, you're seeing a Latif Blessing come from LAFC. He's someone I believe that is familiar with Bruce. Same with Dave Romney. They kind definitely, yeah, Dave Romney. Out in LA. So there are a lot of Bruce guys coming in, and I think Dave Romney is going to be the one to kind of change the tide. He looked really good, and it seems like he's going to be a key player for the Revolution, especially with the amount they invested in him. But when it comes to those domestic transfers, there's been a lot of misses, I would say. And you look internationally, there have been some good transfers. George Petrovic being one of them.
Yeah.
But also, you have guys like Dylan Barrero and Giacomo Veroni coming in and not making that immediate impact that you would like. So I think it'll be a big year for Veroni and Barrero. They kind of have to make their impact and show that they were worth that transfer. But when it comes to the domestic transfers, that's where the highest skepticism seems to be.
Yeah, because let's look at those signings that you've made so far. The main ones, Dave Romney, Latif Blessing, and Bobby Wood, have all come in as domestic transfers. I mean, Bobby Wood seems to be that Josie Altidore replacement, the backup forward who's gonna put in the work, but maybe isn't the starting level caliber you'd like. But defensively, that center of defense had those issues. Omar Gonzalez, you said, wasn't the player. Farrell had some, and Kessler had mistakes in them. But behind them, Georgi Petrovic was fantastic. You got two of the best fullbacks in the league, with Brandon By and on the right there. If we're adding Dave Romney, does that now add a much more secure defense? Because at times they were left quite open at times.
Yeah, I think, it adds some security, it adds some depth for sure. When you look at, the outside backs, like you mentioned, you got DeJuan Jones, one of the best, was
Mm,
able to get US men's national team playing time this January camp. Brandon Bye has really, stepped it up these last 2 seasons. And so, I think Romney can step in. I think with the amount that they invested, they signed him to a new deal. Wouldn't surprise me at all to see him in the starting 11. It's kind of just figuring out how they're going to build. I
mm,
think if there's a two-man back line, you likely see Dave Romney and Andrew Farrell get the start, and that would move Henry Kessler, who's in a contract year, to the bench. But also, too, there does seem to be the option of playing a five-man back line, with three center backs. So it would be interesting to see if that's the case. It hasn't historically been something that Bruce Arena has utilized. But with that
mm.
depth, you could start all three of those guys. But after that, there's still some questions, whether it be Christian McCoon, he can play defensive midfield, also can play as a center back. You still have Omar Gonzalez. You have Victor Souza, who was drafted in the MLS Super Draft. So, there's definitely some much added depth there. And I think you can now have a true competition for a starting 11
Yeah.
spot. Last year it was pretty much Andrew Farrell and Henry Kessler, and they struggled too because Andrew Farrell struggled with some injuries. Kessler, had some time off as well. So I think now that you have a guy like Dave Romney who's going to add to that competition, and I think kind of lead the way, it makes everybody better being able to raise that level, compete each and every week for a roster spot, a starting 11 spot. So it'll be interesting to see just how Bruce ends up lining everybody out. But I would definitely expect to see Dave Romney out there in the starting 11.
Has there been, like, from what you've seen and heard from preseason, has there been sort of a mix up of some of the tactics and the ways the team's playing to trial some of these maybe different options, or three at the back or anything like that?
Yeah, it definitely sounds like, at least from what we've been able to see, MLS
Yeah, no
preseason,
one can get
you don't
there.
get a
Yeah.
lot, but we were able to see, I think they kind of with punctuations and semicolons, they kind of gave it away that they were
Yeah.
experimenting, with like a five-man back line. And I believe Romney was even asked about experimenting as well too. So we
Mm,
found out, they definitely are experimenting. So I think it'll be really interesting. Bruce Arena doesn't really love talking about formations, but
no.
it's an interesting quandary, with the amount of talent you do have. Henry Kessler came in his rookie season, was absolutely amazing, and then took a step back in his second season. So, he can be a top center back. And, you have Andrew Farrell, that veteran who can kind of be, that setting piece, in the terms that he can calm everything down a little bit. And then, like I said, Romney, I think he's going to be a starter no matter what. So it'll be interesting to see just what they end up doing, but they definitely are trying some things out.
Yeah, and what's the thoughts with the Latif Blessing signing? For me, it looks like someone who's got a lot of energy. Maybe he didn't have a huge amount of a role last year in LAFC. It was sort of in and out and wasn't particularly, like, didn't seem the happiest at the club at the time. Does he bring something that will maybe give Carlos Hill a little bit more freedom, a little bit more ability to find space better with someone like Blessing, who is quite, from what he's often played as, quite all action and very, like, aggressive in the press as well.
Yeah, I think he kind of adds to that overall just starting 11 competition, when it comes to maybe a spot, if the Revs want to break out a diamond, he can be on either side and
Mm,
kind of just add that speed, add that pace. It's been something that the Revolution have been missing really ever since they lost someone like Tajon Buchanan. They
yeah.
tried replacing him, with Dylan Barrero, but similar to Veroni, just struggled with injuries, struggled kind of acclimating. But I think, Latif Blessing can be, a valuable piece. He talked about, I believe this was the striker out in Los Angeles, just the overall frustration, whether it be with his role, he's had some difficulties getting his family over from Ghana to the United States, and it sounds like the Revolution are making more of an effort to try and get them over
Okay.
here. So obviously, when you're struggling off the field, it can bleed onto the field. So it
Yeah.
seems like he's really motivated to come in, make an impact, and compete for a starting 11 spot. It wouldn't surprise me if he does end up getting there, but it'll definitely be a competition in the midfield when you have two dynamic players like Dylan Barrero and Latif Blessing competing for minutes.
Yeah, and Carlos Hill, we saw venting his frustration on the on the pitch at the towards the bench at points last season, and some of that was due to injuries and the team like not being as sort of free flowing as it was in 2021. What do you feel that the club has done to make sure that they're going to be getting the best out of Carlos Hill this year, like they did in 2021?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to, personally for me, the formation that they deploy. Obviously, I think it's important to get the DPs on the field. But when
Mm,
it comes to having a Gustavo Bo, who's really traditionally more of a 10, I would say, or, more of a winger than a traditional number nine. And then you also have Giacomo Veroni. He's going to take that number nine spot. Trying to figure out the best formation is really going to be the key. Do you have Bo kind of more out on the wing? Do you go back to kind of a diamond? It's going to be really interesting, but I think they brought in the necessary pieces. If Bobby Wood is able to play that Josie Altidore role in a much better sense, I think that will be good. I think they've shored up the back line, which will help out a lot in terms of, keeping the team in games and turning these
mm,
games that they lost last year maybe into draws or possibly wins. So I think, they went out and got the acquisitions, like you mentioned, Latif Blessing. It's just seeing if they're able to put the puzzle pieces together
mm.
and really come up with the right formation for the team. And, if that isn't the case when they start the season, being able to make adjustments. There's been some times when Bruce Arena has been a bit too slow to adjust. For me, that CONCACAF Champions League game sticks out when they
Mm.
went really defensive and ended up biting them because Pumas ended up making a comeback and Bruce Arena just didn't adjust. So if they're able to make the adjustments that they need to, I think they should get the best out of Carlos Heel. And the best out of Carlos Heel, he's proven, that's an MVP caliber
Yeah.
player.
Yeah, definitely. And looking at Veroni, then like from the glimpses we managed to get to see, obviously injuries and sort of settling in and sort of disrupted how much he could get going last year. Does he look like the focal point that could replace Buxa? Not straight away to getting the goals that Buxa did and being at that level, but having that option. I mean, your fullbacks get forward so well, can deliver crosses. Carlos Hill can play through balls. So you've got those options, but can he be that number nine, do you think, this year? Maybe a 15 goal plus striker?
Yeah, I would like to see him definitely get that double digit goal. I think when you have a DP striker, that's always the goal. And I think what he brings and what's been missing since Adam Boots has left is that aerial presence.
Mm,
Boots was able to go up and get crosses from DeJuan Jones and Brandon By and put them home with ease. And I think, I think Veroni still has some work to do in that area, but just with his height and natural ability, he's able to bring that. And I also think, there were times where his movement was a bit off, but I think just building that chemistry with Carlos Heel and the rest of his
yeah.
teammates, I think he should improve. Same for Dylan Barrero. Just being able to have a full off season is so valuable. And now that they do have that, I think they should improve, and we should see what these players are really capable of. It's really difficult coming into MLS, whether it be from the Brazilian league or from over in Austria. So it'll be really interesting to see what they can do. But when it comes to the DP player, you're expecting double-digit goals. So I think Revolution fans are all hoping that Veroni will be able to put up those numbers.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, it has a good pedigree of youth football coming up through in Europe, so it's going to be exciting to see how he can settle. I mean, it sounded like from the little bits I know of him, he's like he was already an English speaker, which helped coming in, so he was able to assimilate with the group. And yeah, this time to actually get get working together rather than being thrown in that so many players need, and will be interesting to see. And where do you feel the club are now, sort of with their roster? Are there areas when you sort of look through it? Are there areas where there still needs to be players coming in? Maybe is a little bit short in the center of midfield on sort of depth options, maybe.
Yeah, that's probably where I'd land, kind of in the midfield, more of that maybe defensive midfield, kind of that six role. You have guys like Matt Polster, Tommy McNamara. I think Polster's going to be the starter, but then, do you want to go to a Tommy McNamara? You do got some young guys, but they're kind of more on the attacking side. So I think, defensive midfield, just shoring that spot up. Like I mentioned before, Christian McCoon, he kind of plays a mix of center back and
Yeah.
that number six role. So if I have to say anywhere, I just say that defensive midfield role, because I think ideally you want a player like Tommy McNamara coming off the bench. He's great when he is on the field, but I think if you want to compete for MLS Cups, he's going to be a bench piece, not someone who's in the starting
Yeah.
11. Obviously, with Leagues Cup and just all the madness that will be this
Yeah.
season, you're going to need lots of roster rotation. So I think building that depth as much as possible will be very important.
Yeah, yeah, you imagine so. Obviously, it's still time. We've got sort of just under a couple of weeks now till the season starts. So it'll be interesting to see who comes in, and maybe would you imagine they're going to be looking domestically then, so that they get players maybe a little bit more MLS ready, without that preseason to assimilate.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. Obviously, you get the winter transfer window kind of
Mm,
over in Europe shutting down. So just being able to possibly get MLS talent, or maybe you're looking at changing the roles of someone like a Noel Buck who kind of got his debut last season, Esmir Baraktarovic. They also did just sign Jack Peniotto to a first team deal, but like I mentioned before, those guys are kind of more attacking midfielders, so you'd
mm.
have to transfer those guys to a new role. But I would definitely say domestically, looking in maybe an MLS trade, that's probably where they'd be looking forward to acquire someone.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do. And you've mentioned a couple of those young players like Buck there, and if, for anyone who maybe doesn't follow the Revolution too closely, who are these sort of next young players coming through then that could maybe get a bit more of a sort of an important role this season?
Yeah, for me, I'm really high on, I would say, Esmir. I just call him Esmir because I cannot pronounce his name. Esmir and Jack Paniotto. Jack has really kind of rose up the ranks quite quickly, and through preseason, he's gotten a lot of minutes. And we've seen players like Esmir and Nolbuck get some time with Revs too, but
Mm,
he's consistently stayed with the first team. So it seems like an indication that he's going to have a role. Esmir, he trained over in the Netherlands with AZ Alkmaar, so that was a great experience for him.
well,
And I think he can really be a talented player. He's been someone who's gone up through the U.S. youth national team ranks. So I think he's someone who could possibly break into that starting 11 if he has a really good season and kind of matures as a player. And Notebook as well, he was able to rise up through the ranks, through the academy. He was able to get his first goal in his debut season. He's more of an attacking midfielder. They kind of deployed him as more of a winger.
mm,
Jack Paniotto, I could see kind of being deployed as a winger, but Esmir is more of a midfielder in that sense. So they really have a lot of young players who are coming up and being able to make a name for themselves. It's just a question if Bruce Arena is going to trust them, play the kids and
yeah.
give them the minutes they need. But I would definitely say it wouldn't surprise me if someone like Jack Paniotto or Esmir are able to break into the starting 11, especially if, the Revs repeat of 2022 and struggle. You got to give the kid as much minutes as possible. But they are really talented, and I think they have a pretty bright future.
Yeah, it's interesting to see with the Revolution, because I spoke with Dave Romney before for World Football Index, and he was talking about how he's excited to be part of a role where he's a leader and he's a mentor, which he didn't so much have in Nashville because the team was so new and they didn't have an academy and things were going. So he's going into this new environment as a sort of a role model and someone to help the younger players as well. It seems like you've got that throughout the pitch as well, though. Like it's not just one man in one position. It's not just Farrell. You've got the players in the midfield and up front that can really sort of help develop these young players as well.
Yeah, when I'm talking to young players, there's obviously a lot of Farrell and, also to Matt Polster's a name that's brought up, kind of
Mm,
in the midfield. But especially Carlos Heel, he's really taken that captain role and been a great mentor, talking to Esmir, talking to Jack, those are guys that can lean on someone like Carlos with his experience. And it just seems, even though there were some struggles last year, that there's a locker room where young players can ask questions and kind of, navigate their way as they're becoming pros. So it's been absolutely amazing. And I've been really intrigued to hear, even if it's a player like Esmir Nolbuck or Jack Paniotto, that, the guys in the back line, like Andrew Farrell and Dave Romney, these, MLS veterans, they're still able to help them out and kind of, answer any questions that they have.
But as we like I said, there's not too long till kickoff now. How are your thoughts now looking into it with the players that have been brought in? Maybe your impressions of what the back office may do with the time that's left. Can you see the Revolution being back in the playoffs next year? In towards the end of this year?
I mean, I think that has to be the goal,
Mm,
especially, obviously there's 2 weeks left in the season, so it'd be pretty wild if they end up doing this. But there's the rumors that they're going to mess with the playoff format. And if you have
yeah.
expanded playoffs, that makes the playoffs even more important if you're going to have even more teams. But I think even, as the playoffs stand, with the talent that you have, a former MVP, you have to at least be making the playoffs. And I think if they were to miss the playoffs, it'd be a pretty massive disappointment. And obviously, Bruce Arena is a great coach, but you need to start seeing those results.
Yeah.
So I think, playoffs should be the goal. Once you get there, anything can happen. And I think that's really the key is, getting hot at the right time. Bruce Arena says all the time that you just have to get hot at the right time to be able to win an MLS Cup. But the floor, the bar is getting into those playoffs and being able to compete for that MLS Cup.
Yeah, it's gonna be exciting conference in the East. Quite a few teams have improved. A kind of, few teams like CF Montreal, you just don't not sure what you're going to get with them at the moment. They've got the players, but it's the coach, the brand new coach, seeing how he does with them, and it's interesting with New England where they've brought in just not met too many different pieces. It's just been adding a little bit of experience into that team, which maybe they lost out on through injuries and sort of two of the transfers not really working out. And does it seem then this squad is a little bit more better organized going into this year than maybe last year?
Yeah, I would definitely say that, bringing in someone like, Bobby Wood, just more increasing that depth, I think was very important. And it just seemed like, going back to 2021, I think Bruce Arena even said it himself, the team overperformed, far
Mm,
exceeded expectations. And then when you come to 2022, everything kind of just came crashing down and he came back down to earth. And for a lot of players, that was a valuable experience of seeing that, things aren't always going to be easy and that you're going to have to work hard.
mm.
So I think, going through that, having all that experience, you're going to see a better Revolution team. I don't think they're going to be at the top of the Eastern Conference, but I think they should be competing, for a playoff spot in what will be a very interesting Eastern Conference. But I think those experiences will help them out and they're just much more stronger in terms of their roster and just able to compete, which will be very important.
Excellent. Yeah, it's going to be definitely one to the conference is going to be very hard to predict going into it, and it's going to be really exciting. And having this League's Cup's really going to change the way teams address their seasons. Like you're saying there, Bruce Arena is saying you just got to get hot at the right time. It's going to be strange having this sort of congested beginning, a long break for the League's Cup and getting back into it. It's gonna. How do you feel they're going to prepare for this? Is it just going to be let's just go out and try and win every game, or is it let's develop our system better to become more structured?
I would say when it comes to it, Bruce Arena, he's getting up there in age, and he wants to bring an MLS Cup to the New England Revolution. So this is a win now mode.
Yeah,
You want to win as many games as you can. He's never been one to go all out in the U.S. Open Cup, and it'll be interesting to see his strategy when it does come to the Leagues Cup because in CONCACAF Champions League, the and the MLS playoffs in 2021, the Revs had a humongous break and it ended
mm,
up, biting them in the sense that NYCFC was able to beat them.
yeah,
I think if that's the case again, where God forbid the Revs get knocked out in whether it's the group stage or possibly one of those first games after, the Revs could be facing a massive break, and how are you going to handle that? How are you going to keep guys fit? So it'll be very interesting to see. But in terms of that regular season, they're going to go all out. They're going to do whatever it takes to get back into the playoffs and hopefully be lifting the MLS Cup at the end of the season.
excellent, brilliant. Thank you so much, Sam, for joining me today. It's really good to get a little bit of a deep dive into this team that was we had so many changes last year, and to address this new season, it'll be really exciting to see how they get on.
Perfect, Michael. Thank you so much for having me on.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sam.
Thank